you're telling the story of the whole person, and their disability isn't their whole identity. And it's not the only thing that's interesting about them or compelling about them. Tell the story of the person. We are all interesting people. We're all more than what we can or can't do.
Hey, welcome to the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast here on the B Podcast Network. This is a show dedicated to helping higher ed marketers tell better stories, create better content, and enroll more students. My name's John Azzoni. I'm the founder at Unveiled, and we're a video production company working specifically with college marketing teams to make it easy for them to scale up and even automate their student and alumni success stories through our subscription approach. And you can learn more about that at unveiled.tv, and that's unveiled.tv. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, go ahead and subscribe. We'd love to have you. And if you're wanting your college or university's content to resonate on a deeper emotional level with prospective students, with alumni, with parents, whatever, I want you to subscribe to my free newsletter. Every week I send out tips and insights on creating more emotionally resonant content, including examples and best practices from other institutions, articles and blog posts, that week's podcast episode, and much more. So head over to unveiled.tv/newsletter and sign up. All right, let's get on with the show. My guest today is Jaime Hunt. Jaime is a seasoned vice president and chief marketing officer, currently serving at Old Dominion University in coastal Virginia with a career spanning nearly 2 decades. Jaime's expertise encompasses a wide range of areas, including brand strategy, recruitment marketing, internal and crisis communications, issues management, digital innovation, and media relations. Jaime is also the host of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO on the Enrollify Network. Today, we're talking about something I think is really special, and that is telling the stories of our students with disabilities and why that's so important. So, Jaime, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So let's start off by having you tell us something people would be surprised to know about you.
So I thought a little bit about what would this be, because I'm fairly an open book, but my original college major was biology, and I intended to become a turtle researcher. And
Really?
My parents made me look through the want ads and find all the turtle related jobs that were in them, and there were 0. So I had to change. I changed my major, went into journalism, haven't looked back. But a lot of people, I think of marketing people as being more the creatives, and they don't really think about the science of marketing. And one of the things I really love about marketing is it blends art and science, which are 2 things that I'm really passionate about. So that's my thing. Probably if people have been following me for a while, they know about the turtle thing. Literally, my license plate is for turtles. So if you're following me on the highway, you know that I love turtles. But just in case there's listeners who don't know about my obsession.
Interesting. Are you a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Or is
Yes. Yeah. And the latest Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie is amazing.
It is really good. I saw it. I used to be a big fan when I was a kid. Obviously had the action figures and everything, but it'd been like a long time since I had been part of, had like caught up on the franchise or anything like that. But we took our kids to see it, and it was cool. It was like nostalgia.
Yeah, it's super cute. It didn't go in on those like Navy SEAL looking Ninja Turtle movies that they had for a while. I'm like, they're teenagers, but I thought that one really made like they had braces. Like where is the turtle going to the dentist to get braces?
Those are just the creative license. They expect to just kind of go over your head. Most people's head, except we pay attention to that stuff. All right. So we're talking about telling stories of people with disabilities. So this is a cool topic. I was excited when you and I chatted last week about this. And so tell us about why is this an important topic for you?
Well, I just think that we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion in higher education. And a lot of times I think we focus in on that being primarily racial or ethnicity. And for me, I think about 1 in 4 of our students reports having a disability. And that is 25% of the folks on our campus having some sort of disability. And we're not having those conversations. We're not having the conversations about how we can better support them and encourage them, help them to see how they can thrive at our institutions. I was looking at some statistics this morning that really look at what the rate is of those students dropping out and actually like accomplishing their degree. And it's like less than 40%, I think,
Hmm.
according to the beginning post-secondary students longitudinal study, which is a mouthful, but 23% of undergraduate students reported a disability or who reported a disability actually earned a degree in 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that if you want to look at just a business case for supporting students with disabilities, right there, if you can move the needle a little bit on that, or a lot bit on that, suddenly you're having a big impact on your graduation rates. Um,
Right.
but I mean, hopefully, people listening also understand a moral imperative to do things in a way that supports everyone and to look at diversity and inclusion as being something that doesn't need a business purpose, but there
Hmm.
definitely is a business purpose for supporting students with disabilities. So I'm really passionate about this. I have an invisible disability. I am aware of a lot of people in my life who have both visible and invisible disabilities. And I think there's a personal passion for it for me that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love what you said about diversity isn't just, racial or gender diversity, but it's all of it. It's all of like, there are so many different types of people in the world with different hurdles and things like that, and that's what, diversity inclusion is really about. It's not just like getting the right mix of races in our content or religious affiliation, but it's all of it. And yeah, I would think like you mentioned having invisible disability. I have one as well, and I would argue that like on some level probably everybody has something
Right,
that
right. Yeah. Well, and like the sheer number of adults that are figuring out in adulthood that they are on the autism spectrum or they have ADHD or some other form of um, neurodiversity, I,
Mhm.
I suspect the number is way, way higher than even we think it is. And when you think about it's 25% that report having a disability,
Right.
I mean, that means there's probably tons of people who aren't reporting it. Or, like in the case of my disability, it doesn't impact me every single day. And so that makes it a little bit easier for me to forget to report it, if that makes sense. Because I don't currently need accommodations for it. I have it at other points in my life. And so if you don't need accommodations for your disability, or if there's a stigma attached to whatever that disability is, I think then you're less likely to report that. But that's based on, my gut instinct and not any sort of science. But
Yeah.
I know that for me, reporting my disability, there was like a moment of no, but you're able, right? Like,
Hmm.
but no, you have this real thing that can sometimes limit you a little bit.
Yeah, I remember the first time I reported mine, just mental health stuff. I was a long time ago. I was applying for a job, and they were like, "Do you have a disability?" Like, and I'm like, really had to think about like, is it really a disability? Like, do I disclose that?
Right.
Is it going to affect how they view? Are they going to make all sorts of assumptions about me?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like a very real thing. And yeah, 25%. And I think like a lot of times, so like I'll update my website, and people have different, like if you're in like e-commerce or something, like the alt text and all that kind of stuff is there. And for me, it's so tempting to be like, that's an afterthought. Like I'm like so driven to like get whatever the basic thing is up and live, that I'm like, I'll just type in some random stuff. I've like lately been really focused on that. I have an assistant that actually has started helping me like kind of go back and do all the alt text like properly. But I mean it's just sort of like a symptom of like we don't think about it, and we're kind of like, well, how many blind people really do I know?
Right. Right. When I was at a previous institution, there was a blind faculty member that would call our help desk anytime somebody sent an email where it was just a JPEG with no alt text and no accompanying text. And she would have them read it, and then they would call me because I was this passionate guru for this. And then I went and created a policy and got it through our cabinet and through our board that required that you had to have alt text. This is, everybody knew better. This is like 2010, but people weren't as, I think, conscious of it. And then anytime one came through, I saw it as an opportunity for me to do an educational moment. But that faculty member would call every single time. So even if you just have one person on your campus who isn't getting your messages because you're sending them as an image that they can't read, that's one human being that is feeling left out and feeling uninformed and may not know some critical piece of information. And one should be enough to do it the right way.
Yeah. I used to work in a call center at United Way, and we had you were 211. It was like you call for like information or referral resources. And every time I come across an opportunity to include alt text, I think of my coworker Rhonda, who had I forget what her disabilities was. She was in a wheelchair, had some mobility issues, but also she had like, it would like read everything to her. And I was always just so amazed. I'm like, I can't believe like you've figured out a way to like navigate an entire database of health and human service resources, working around the struggles that you have. But I always think about like, could Rhonda read this picture? Like, would she know? Could she read this email and know what this was about, or this web page or whatever? So that's always stuck with me.
The hardest thing is charts. Like, how do you translate a chart with the alt text? And you need to try, and you need to do it. But images, that's not that difficult. Just describe what the image is. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Low hanging fruit.
So you talked about how this kind of became a focus for you. Was there kind of a turning point where it sounds like you've kind of always kind of had this this passion, but was there a turning point where you started to get more serious about talking about this issue and teaching people about it?
Yeah. So honestly, that faculty member, that was when I was at Radford University. I was talking to that faculty member and developing a sense of what her challenges were and how just this simple thing was impacting her, that I suddenly kind of realized that if I'm not seeing anybody advocate for this person, then I need to be advocating for her. And you can lead from wherever you are. I wasn't a vice president in that role. Use your influence to try to get the things done and to have this policy that's drafted and put into practice and all of that. And it was in part because she talked about how frustrated she was to be missing critical information. And she had to assume that every single email that didn't have content in it, but there was a potential that one of those could be, hey, you need to enroll in benefits by the end of the month, or what, fill in the blank. And so having that conversation was a big tipping point. And that's when, we installed kiosks all over campus. That was my job there. That job had a lot of different kind of crazy components, but wayfinding kiosks were part of my responsibility. And I worked with a company to make Braille signs for those that would direct people to be able to contact someone if they needed to use some of the services that were on the kiosk. And like I said, people knew when they'd get a email from me saying, hey, you're sending this out in a really inaccessible way. What can we do? But then I needed to have a moment of realizing not only do I need to advocate for students with disabilities or our campus community in general with disabilities, but I also need to do a better job of telling their stories. Yeah. And so that was something that takes a little bit more effort to figure out how to do in a way that doesn't tokenize people.
Right.
But that piece is really important to me.
Yeah. The tokenize thing, that's something that it's a really fine line to be like, I had a student I was interviewing from our college where we were doing a video on her, and had a great sense of humor. She was super funny. And she was African American, and she's like, before we started rolling, she's like, I know why they picked me, because I'm black,
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, it was funny, but it's like, you don't want to make someone with a disability actually feel that way.
Right. This is like our token person in a wheelchair or whatever.
Right.
That said, though, I have a stack of view books on my desk right now, like other schools' view books. I'm willing to bet that I find 0 pictures of someone in a wheelchair or with an assistive device, a cane, a seeing eye dog, a service dog. We just don't include people in our checking of the boxes for how diverse our materials look. That's one population that is just, I feel like, incredibly invisible to us as marketers, and we're not thinking about enough. And that's just really sad.
Yeah, and diversity is constantly brought up in meetings about like pre-production for videos or planning marketing campaigns. It's always like, I can't think of a project where that diversity wasn't something of importance that we had to consider as we were going about the video making process. And what really one thing that really like changed me, I was casting for worked for a previous production company. We were casting for a commercial or something about, I think it was about vaccines or something like that, and posted on Facebook and about it, like, hey, we're casting kids, to be in this video. And my friend reached out to me privately, and she was like, hey, her son has Down syndrome, and she's like, you really need to think about like diversity being, also like neurodiversity. Like, have you considered diversity beyond just skin color and things like that? And I think about that all the time now. Like, when I'm like, what would it look like? Because we always try to like, there's some weird thing with like front facing marketing where it's like, well, let's find the ideal specimen of a person. Let's find people who are attractive and represent the look that we want. And we need to, but we really need to like expand beyond that and think like, there's so many people that are looking at your piece of content and going, can I see myself in that? And if all we're doing is just limiting it to this very narrow profile of what, beauty is or whatever, then we're missing so many people.
Oh, absolutely. I remember working with another vice president, not mine, but another vice president at Radford, who very much wanted me to only do attractive people. So when I had a photo for the homepage that had a girl that was possibly not conventionally attractive, in his opinion, he's like, we really need to focus on just the good looking kids. Like, that's just so icky. It
is. It's rampant in churches too. Like even in churches, like a lot of these mega churches, I know a lot of the staff that have worked at these places. And that's just a common thing. Let's put all the pretty people in the front, 5 rows.
Oh,
and
gosh.
It's just like,
that's
what
icky.
Are you doing? Yeah.
Especially at a church. Like, that's super icky. I don't love that.
I know. Seriously. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, those are good thoughts. I wanted to ask, like, so as marketers, when we're thinking about these things, like we often think about like, when we think about prospective students, we're often thinking about like what questions are they asking? What problems are they having? And we think about, the obvious things would be like, okay, they might be wondering what's the academic experience like? What's campus life like? Will I fit in? What does it cost? Like those kind of like basic things. But like, from your perspective, talk about like, what are some concerns that students with disabilities might be wondering about that we might not be thinking about as content creators?
Yeah. So at the AMA conference in 2022, there was a panel discussion with a group of, I think they were all rising seniors, or they were seniors because it was in their senior year. And they were talking about, what they were looking for in a college and et cetera, et cetera. And I think there was maybe 8 or 10 students. And several of them mentioned specifically looking for information as it related to their disability. So one was low vision, and I believe she used a cane. And she said that she if it took her more than 3 clicks to try to find information about reasonable accommodations and all of that, and she just went off the website and marked that one off her list.
Mm.
And another student who had some mobility challenges said that she did those like Google Street View tours and campus tours as much as she could to try to figure out, are there going to be a lot of elevation changes on campus? Am I going to have any challenges accessing buildings if I'm on crutches or whatever? So they were looking for how navigable is the campus. And then that first student I mentioned was looking for how navigable are the resources for us to be able to get the support that we need as a student with disabilities. So I think it's really those basic things. How can I do what I need to do as a student here, whether it's online or on campus? Have you stuck your disabilities office in some dark corner? I was on a campus once where I was like, you have to take steps down to get into the disability office, and there isn't an elevator. Like, this makes no sense. Like, why?
Yeah.
How is this going to work? But, how much resources are you putting towards supporting the students? We also hear a lot from students who are looking specifically for mental health information. And I know that's something that you had mentioned. And that's something I think is really, really important to students, that we have resources to be able to continue their care if they need it from a mental health perspective. Or are we a culture where the faculty are going to embrace and accept those reasonable accommodations that they're asked for? And how can we showcase in our marketing that we are that kind of place?
Yeah.
There's just a lot of layers there.
Josie Alquist has a recent episode on her podcast, Josie and the Podcast, just came out the other day. And it's with Rachel Putman, who I forget what school she works for, but she was talking about how she works with her students, on campus and building these like sort of student marketing teams. And one of the things they did was an Instagram campaign where they posted like a story or something where you can kind of like type in a response or like slide the slider to the happy face or the sad face, and it was really just like, how are you doing? And people would slide it, and if anyone slid it towards the sad face, they would like directly follow up with that person and make sure that they had access to mental health resources or whatever. And I just thought that was so cool to like when your social media team is you're not just about getting likes and these vanity metrics and engagement and stuff like that, but like taking the students that are already there. How can you use social media to actually improve their lives and give them a place to say, hey, I'm not okay today.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a really cool campaign idea.
I love that. And I think we have so many students that are really struggling with anxiety and mental health challenges. And I don't have the statistic in front of me, but at AMA this past year, we had a speaker in the senior leadership portion talking about, I want to say it was something like over 30% of adults between 18 and 24 say that they have had many days where they don't feel able to function because of their mental health. And it's like, that's just sad. And it's a reality. Like, you can't just tell somebody, don't be sad. Like, I wish that worked. That doesn't work.
Anyone that says that has never experienced any mental health crisis. You would have to know,
Right.
that,
right.
It's like, it's just, I think about that often. Sometimes it's like, when you have a friend or a spouse or a family member that's dealing with mental health, it's like, they can't just think differently. You can't think your way out of a mental health crisis.
No, you can't. And I'm a big believer in therapy, and I'm a big believer in meditation. And I think meditation can help reduce stress and anxiety levels, but it's not a magic bullet, and it's not something that doesn't take a ton of practice to get good at. I started doing meditation because I was a chronic pain sufferer, and I was able to meditate to alleviate pain. And it's so helpful if you're at the doctor's office because you sprained your ankle to be able to like meditate and not necessarily feel the pain for a little bit. But that's a ton of practice to get to that point.
Oh yeah.
You can't just be like, okay, just go and now you're happy. It worked. Awesome. You're fine.
Right. It takes a lot of practice. I used to see a therapist who is a big anxiety meditation kind of influencer. And she runs these meditation sessions, and she was telling me, she's like, we have people who are undergoing like literal surgery who are using meditation instead of anesthesia.
Wow.
And she's
That's amazing.
she's like working with these people to do like these breathing and hypnosis exercises. And it was just really interesting how effective that is. And that's something that I think it's a tool that needs to be taught, and it's something that people have to practice, because it's probably like people would probably just bounce from that activity so easily when they sit down to meditate and they can't focus for the first couple times, and they think about other things and they go, I didn't get anything out of that. But like, what would it look like for a school, to be like, hey, while you're here on campus, we're going to teach you these tools, as well, to kind of get through, daily life and things like that.
The first university I worked for, Northwestern Health Sciences University, it had a lot of alternative medicine programs, and we had wellness programs that were geared toward that topic. Like, how can you meditate to reduce stress? That's where I was first introduced to the concept of being able to meditate for pain relief. They had all sorts of wellness workshops and yoga workshops and all, cranial psychotherapy workshops and all this stuff. Because I think that was more of an Eastern medicine type approach, which I think in a lot of ways is a lot more holistic to us as human beings than Western medicine can be.
Yeah. Quick break here to tell you about a thing that all the cool higher ed marketers are doing. They've all subscribed to the Higher Ed Storytellers Digest. It's my weekly email newsletter where I unpack practical tips, insights, and inspiration for creating more emotionally resonant content for their institutions. And guess what? I think you're cool, and I want you on the list. Past newsletters have featured stuff like the anatomy of viral content. What makes a piece of content spread like wildfire? Also, examples of really compelling user-generated video content coming out of other institutions and getting a lot of traction on YouTube. We've also talked about how emotional content isn't just being sappy all the time. There's a variety of emotions that your content can speak to that can inspire a prospective student to take the next step with your institution. And so we've unpacked that. We've shared exclusive mini podcast episodes and bonus content that you can't get anywhere else but the newsletter. We've shared workflow tips for using AI to aid in content creation, all kinds of stuff that we unpack in this newsletter. And on more than one occasion, I've treated my entire list to free Starbucks. I make no promises, but just saying, it's been done twice. You'll also stay up to date on the latest episodes from this podcast. So if email is a better way for you to subscribe to a podcast, this is the way. So head over to unveiled.tv/newsletter and sign up. And when you sign up, you'll be given immediate access to all the previous editions of the newsletter, so you can binge the various topics that we've touched on and links and resources we've shared, all that stuff. So do that. Unveiled.tv/newsletter. Unveiled is spelled UNVEILD. Okay, back to the show. So shifting gears a little bit, you sent me a couple examples of storytelling. You sent me an example of Radford and then Old Dominion college tour videos. Let's talk about those a little bit. Like, tell me how those came about and what are your thoughts about them? Just explain them too. Wait, I posted a poll last week on LinkedIn about, do people actually watch the video of this or do they just listen? And it was like overwhelmingly people listen. So it made me think like, okay, we have to explain these videos.
I totally get it. So the first video, the video with at Radford University, is a graduation profile. And we showcased these father and son who were graduating. The son was legally blind. I think he had like very slight amount of vision, but used a cane. And his dad had a heart condition that made exercise and that sort of thing really difficult for him. And when the son went to college, was having some challenges with navigating campus with a cane, which I can't even imagine going through life in that situation, really. And so his father started going with him and then decided he might as well enroll. He might as well get a degree if he's going to all the same classes. So they would get the same class schedule. And the father wasn't able to really carry his backpack and equipment. And so the son carried his stuff and the father navigated them around campus. And it was just a really beautiful story. And if anybody watched it and didn't cry, they don't have a soul. They're clearly sociopaths. But it was a really cool story to be able to show that they thrived. They were going to go to graduate school after completing their bachelor's degree. They were just absolutely thrived on campus. And I thought it was really important to show that. It's not just an inspirational story, but it's a story that showcases that, two people who had physical challenges were able to make college work and to graduate. And I think they even did it in 4 years, but I can't swear to that.
Yeah. What I noticed about it was like, so you think like someone who's blind and is walking with a cane, when you think disabilities, that's probably maybe one that comes to mind. But like the heart issue, and he can't even carry his books. Like that's one that's probably goes under the radar, that I thought that video did a good job of like, bringing to light. It's like, how, what does it look like for someone that physically can't, get around,
Right. And you wouldn't necessarily know it by looking at him. It's one of those invisible disabilities, again, where the situation is something that you as a casual observer wouldn't know that he had that challenge. So that was great. The other example that I sent to you was actually one of a couple that we had in our college tour. So we are working with the college tour to have a 30-minute episode that actually we just got live last week. And we showcased actually 2 students that dealt with disabilities during their time. So there was 10 total students profiled, and 2 of them specifically spoke about their disabilities in their video. The first is the part of the episode that opens the full episode, and she talks about the mental health issues that she has and how she got support for that on our campus. And the second person was somebody who was a disabled veteran who was taking advantage of the resources available to him as a veteran and as a disabled veteran. And I thought it was really, really important to have those pieces of their stories be in that video, in that episode. It's, having about 20% of the cast of the episode being people that speak about their disabilities is somewhat almost exactly representative of what our student body looks like in terms of reported disabilities. I also wanted to have somebody who was talking about more of an invisible disability, like the mental health challenges that Hadley spoke about, and then to have someone who had some physical disability that he spoke about in his portion of the episode. And I just think that having these stories in there, it's just a matter of fact. It's not Disability Awareness Month. It's not, fill in the blank, Autism Awareness Month, whatever. It's just part of the fabric of our episode is that people talk candidly about, their challenges. And so it was important to me that we consider that as we consider the overall diversity of the episode. And I'm really grateful in the casting process that we had multiple students, and we had some others, in fact, that ultimately weren't selected, but we had a number of students that wished to talk about their disability, that was part of their story and part of who they are as people. And as someone in my 40s, who's still like not out, I'm putting that in air quotes, but I'm not completely out about my disability with everybody that I encounter. I think there's like a stigma attached to it. I'm really grateful that these young people are willing to share their stories and that they do so just in such a matter-of-fact way. hopefully that inspires another prospective student who's looking at these and saying, okay, so this student really seems like she has it together and seems to be really thriving. And she talked about the mental health resources. Maybe this is a place for me. Maybe this is a place where I can get the support that I need to get through college the best way that I can.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that casting process
Oh my
too? Because
gosh.
I think when you said that, I was like, oh, I bet that's just an interesting. I'd just be curious to hear like how you handle that with sensitivity and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I tell people honestly, it's the most stressed I have been at a job in years, like years, since COVID for sure. So we put out a casting call. I think we had about 44 students apply for 10 spots. And the reason it was kind of stressful is I had to create a matrix that looked at, diversity of gender and ethnicity and race, but then make sure we had a representative of undergraduate, master's, and doctoral, and then to make sure we had a representative for every college, and then make sure that we had representatives that could speak to disability. So we asked the students to put together just a little, I think we said the max length was 90 seconds, but a little video shot on your iPhone or whatever. It did not have to be highly produced, that where you just told your story. Like what's your ODU story?
Mm-hmm.
So then, looking at that matrix of all these categories we needed to fill, then going in and seeing who had really cool stories that we could slot into those spots. We also wanted to have some international students. I think we ended up with quite a few international students in it, actually. But yeah, it was exhaustive. We ended up with a wonderful cast. Usually, I've done this twice. We did an episode when I was at Miami University, and usually you end up with one person no shows or ghosts you or doesn't get their script in. We had none of that. Everybody was amazing.
That's great. Yeah, I find in the stories that my company tells that people are generally pretty excited to be chosen, that you were even on the college's radar.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole casting thing that can be like really stressful when you're managing all those variables. I know you're like a AI proponent or whatever. I imagine that would be a good challenge for AI. Like, here's all the transcripts from everyone's submission videos, and here are all the variables. Like, tell me what's missing or who goes where.
That would have been really smart. It honestly didn't occur to me, but that would have been really smart. I could have had a spreadsheet that was like, tell me who to pick. But there is obviously a human element that AI can't, like, is the person engaging on camera?
Right.
Is their tone of voice interesting and compelling, or are they like nervous or dry or whatever? Fill in the blank. But you learn who the weirdos are on campus too. Like, some submit videos where you're like, you let your freak flag fly, and I love you for it. Good for you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think one of the things that we look for is, and I would assume that this applies to, finding people with disabilities. It's like, how open are they to being vulnerable?
Yeah.
Because what makes a good story is not just kind of flying over high level, like, here's the problem I was having, here's how the school helped me, and here's what I'm doing now. Like, that's a good basic structure, but like, there's so much under that iceberg that's real. Like, whatever's under that is really is like where the meat of the emotion is. And I was working with one college, and we were pre-interviewing 10 or 12 people who are all data scientists. So they're all very analytical. And after like the fourth pre-interview, I went to my client. I was like, hey, we gotta shift these questions a little bit, like, because these are just, they will be fine videos, but they are very just like to the point, analytical. Like, here's the question I asked, here's your answer.
I love it.
Yeah. So that's really something that is, AI can't really detect, like, that doesn't have the empathy yet to go like, is this person going to give me anything more than what I'm asking?
Right. When I was a journalist, you had sometimes ran into people that you'd interview and they'd give you one word answers. Like, that's We want people who are going to light up. We want people who
Yeah.
are going to you want to listen to because their face is just animated. And there was a
Yes.
couple people that were very charismatic that we didn't end up picking because we needed somebody in a more specific category, that we've now reached out to them for other projects, because it's like you can't take your eyes off of them once they're
Yeah.
on screen. And that's who
Yeah.
you want.
Right. Oh, the most stressful interview I ever did was this high schooler who was giving me one word answers, and it was so stressful because I'm already like a pretty introverted guy, and I don't like small talk. Like I'm really bad at it. Like
Yeah, me too.
so I'm like, I quickly ran out of steam on like tactics to get him to open up. I ended up having to, thankfully he had a mentor with him, and I had to interview her to get like the meat of the narrative.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it was so difficult, so stressful.
I totally feel you on that. And then you're trying to figure out, how am I going to turn this into something? Like, this isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky.
Yeah. Speaking of AI, so I incorporate AI into this podcast a little bit. So I affectionately, I had this question list, and I put it into Claude, and I said, here's what I'm talking to Jamie about today. What would be other questions to ask? So here's our final 4 questions, our final 3 questions that are coming from the robots here.
All right. I look forward to the robot overlords.
Yeah. What biases or misconceptions still exist around disabilities that these stories can help challenge?
I mean, I think that like there's still a lot of stigma around certain illnesses and certain mental health issues, and that I think that we get into this mindset sometimes where it's like we don't even want to ask someone to tell their story because we think that they're not going to want to, because there's a stigma around what they are dealing with. And I think that's something we just have to shake loose. And I think once you start telling the stories and see the people, you're not dragging it out of people, right? Like the video that I sent you of Hadley talking about her experience, like she's just talking about it matter of fact.
Yeah.
I think that can help make others see that maybe don't have a mental health disability or any other disability, see that you don't have to be afraid to ask somebody to share their story.
Yeah.
Because not everybody shares that viewpoint or about the stigma.
Yeah, that's good. Good answer to that surprise.
To the robots
AI,
endorse
to the
it.
robot question. The robots are applauding right now. Next question. Have there been any instances in real life or in content you've consumed where your views were challenged about people with disabilities? If so, how did that affect ODU's Marcom strategy in any way?
That's an excellent question. I am a donor to Special Books for Special Kids, which sounds like it's about books, but it's not at all. They produce mini documentaries, or mini basically interviews, where the guy who does them sits with someone, many of them with profound physical or mental disabilities, and he just has a conversation with them or talks about what they deal with. And that, for me, seeing how people with profound disabilities light up when they get to tell their story, when somebody shows an actual interest in them as a human being, and seeing the way that he didn't shy away from asking tricky questions or talking about some of the biggest challenges. That for me was like a tipping point in terms of my ability to see that a lot of times people we're not asking are hungry to tell their story. And I think we as marketers have an opportunity to be the person that shines a light on someone. That's what we do, and everything we do is shine a light on someone or something. And so I think, telling the stories of people with disability can really, really shine a bright light on what they are and who they are as people. Yeah. And looking beyond just this isn't a story about, let's say he's interviewing, Jaime Hunt, who has some disability. It's not just, this is the disability. He would dig into who's Jaime Hunt as a person, what are her passions and her hobbies and her interests. And so it just goes beyond educational content to being really inspirational.
Yeah, that's important. And that's one thing I noticed about Hadley's story that you sent me is I was expecting it to be more about the struggles that she was having, but it really was just like, this is part of who I am. But really, here's like all this other cool stuff that I did, and where I found my place on campus and things like that. So I thought that that's a good. I almost like breezed over it when I was listening. I had to like go back and be like, oh, there she talks about like struggles, and it was so normal. To me,
Yeah.
it was just sort of like you just naturally absorb it.
Yeah. And that's
So
kind of the goal. And I think that if people are listening to this who want to do a better job of telling the stories of people with disability, keep that in mind. Like, you're telling the story of the whole person,
right.
and their disability isn't their whole identity. And it's not the only thing that's interesting about them or
Yeah.
compelling about them. Tell the story of the person. We are all interesting people.
Yeah.
We're all more than what we can or can't do.
And you mentioned earlier, and I think we breezed over it a little bit, but like the tokenization
Yeah.
of people with disabilities in our content. What are some ways that you would suggest that we be sensitive to, like, how can we avoid someone feeling like the token person in a wheelchair or something like that?
Yeah. I think the good news for marketers is that there's so little of it happening that I don't know that someone in a wheelchair would immediately jump to, I'm the token person with a disability. The way that I think, particularly like maybe 15 years ago or so, it was like we have the same African American student in every shot because
Yeah.
we want to look diverse, but we aren't yet, or whatever. But I think, again, keeping in mind showcasing them as a person, if you're talking about somebody in a wheelchair or with some other assistive device, is the focus on the device or on the person?
Mm-hmm.
Is the story about the device, or is the story about the person using it? So I think that that's one way. Another thing is, don't just call your disability service office and say, can you send me some people in a wheelchair? So, like, I
Yeah.
want somebody who has an interesting and compelling story. I thought maybe you would know somebody who maybe has overcome some sort of challenge. Be open to invisible disabilities and needing to tell that story in a different way rather than through photos, because they have a assistive dog or other assistive device. And I think letting people give you honest feedback might be the most important thing. I would suggest, if you're new at doing this, potentially looking at producing the story and then soliciting the feedback of the subject before you publish it, which is not something we do all the time with
Mm-hmm.
every single thing that we create, but it gives you a chance to kind of learn, oh, you know what, we don't use that kind of language around this disability, so that you can fix
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Or, like people first language. It's not an autistic person, it's a person who has autism or whatever, fill in the blank there. But giving them that opportunity to give you feedback as you learn how to tell stories in a more authentic and less tokeny sort of way.
Yeah. It reminds me of my aunt, growing up she was a little person, and she had this rare genetic disorder, so she had some other disabilities as well. But just like I always got to be the one that like pushed her in the wheelchair, because I was like the smoothest over like going,
Nice.
and so I felt very like that was always like John's job, was like John gets to push Emily. But I remember just feeling so defensive of her, like out in public and stuff like that, and seeing how like careless use of words really hurt her. Like when people said midget, for instance,
Oh,
like
yeah.
that's like I don't think people realize that that's a hurtful way to say it. It's just in pop culture, like that's just what is said. And it's just one of those types of people that it's like they're typecast into roles specifically for that. And what just grinds my gears is like the fact that they're typecast into a role that pokes fun, like their only purpose is to be made fun of in the
Yeah.
narrative, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, you don't see a lot of film or TV about little people where it's not about the fact that they are a little person, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not about it's not just like, oh, by the way, they also
Yeah.
have this condition. It's like, that's the central fact of who they are.
Right. Yeah. 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 So, I mean, I am constantly growing in my use of like words like that. And my wife is very good at like saying, oh, no, you can't say that. You know, you can't say that
Right.
anymore. So she's taught me a lot as a social worker. But yeah, I think getting feedback is great, is a great suggestion, because I think that we don't realize how we come off. I think we all need that feedback in a non-judgmental way to know that like we're all learning, and the language is always shifting. Like it's always
Yes.
I used to do homeless outreach. That was like my primary role at United Way. And now I had a guest on my show who I used to work with, and she was referring to, you know, what we used to do together as unhoused people. And I was like,
Right.
oh, that's new, since I was
Yeah.
since I it was always homeless when I was working in it. So it's always shifting, and it's always important to have people in your corner that can give you some of that feedback.
100%. Another great resource for that feedback is your disability services office. That they can, even in your casting, if you're like, I want to cast, can you help me do it in the most sensitive way possible? You know, they have that expertise. And I have found that they are hungry to use it. They
Mm-hmm.
want to hear from us. They want to be thought about by our marketing offices, to be thought about in our communications and on our website. So, you know, call that person up and get a cup of coffee and befriend them so that you can get their input on things like, this is how I want to cast. This is the type of students I'm looking for, that kind of thing. They can make that more sensitive.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. My third AI question we actually already covered. Talk about how diversity isn't just skin color. So
Yeah.
I think we're good there, unless you have any other
The
anything.
robots are smart.
They're very smart. I love it so much, and I volley between ChatGPT and Claude, and I find that they are kind of just helpful in different ways. But Claude is like, I'm working on a presentation right now on how Claude helps me be a better storyteller and a better interviewer. And it's become just instrumental to my workflow, you
I
know.
have not played around much with Claude. I might have to dive back in and explore
It's
it
great.
further.
The benefit of Claude, so we're going on a tangent here on this episode, but I think it's welcomed.
Yeah.
We've done AI episodes on here before, but Claude does a great job. And actually Bart Kaler from the Higher Ed Marketer podcast turned me on to it. It does a much better job than ChatGPT at analyzing long text documents.
Oh.
So what I use it for in this podcast is I will take this whole episode with you, Jamie, and get the transcript made, put it into Claude, and then have it write my show notes, have it write, pull out like what are emotional kind of like good snippets for social media. It'll give me the time codes in the
Wow.
transcript. It's the entire thing. Like, podcasting is a very tedious, can be a very
Yes.
tedious process, I'm sure,
Yes,
as
it
you
can.
know.
Yeah.
And that's why like so many people drop off, you know, at like the third episode. It's like 90%
Right.
of people drop off at the third episode because it's so much. You think it's just like, oh, I'll interview some people and put it up. It's like, no, you got to write show notes. You got to find the links. You got to find the guests. You got to do, you know,
Yeah.
like all of this stuff. So yeah, Claude has been an amazing storyteller help. And I use it kind of in conjunction with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is kind of more my like, hey, I have a question, can you give me an answer about this, or can you help me ideate about this? But Claude's a little more like, analyze this big long thing and let's pull out insights from it.
I hate writing my show notes. Like, don't tell my producer, but it's just torment to me. I don't know why.
It is.
And I've been trying to use ChatGPT, but it doesn't analyze my full transcripts. My episodes are like an hour long, and it's like, this is too long for
Too
me to
long.
do anything with. Like,
Yeah.
cool. Thanks,
Yeah.
robot.
Yeah. I know. I got so excited when I found Claude, and I was like, oh my gosh, like the first time it spit out show notes for me with links to the person's LinkedIn profile, their email, everything they mentioned, their Twitter, if they mentioned their Twitter handle, links to the episode that I'm posting this Wednesday. It was just me talking solo episode. I mentioned a few different case studies. It pulled up the links for those YouTube videos without
Wow.
me going to find it. Now, granted, all the links were bad. So I it's getting there. But what it actually did help me do was go, oh, I forgot I talked about this thing that I need a link for. And that's what's super hard about writing show notes is you don't remember all the details of the conversation.
No, it's painful. It's my least favorite part of being a podcast host. It's the show notes.
I would say like 50% of the time it gets the social media handle links right. But it'll at least give you a format to go like, here's all the things you need to say in your show notes, and here's at least placeholder links that you can.
I'm checking this out tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm like super passionate about it.
I have 5 episodes I'm recording in the next 3 weeks, so I need help. I can't do all of these show notes.
Okay. Well, we'll give Claude a task here. Where can people connect with you at?
Yeah.
Let's see if it gets your link right.
So I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn now. Jaime Hunt. My parents blessed me with the unusual spelling of Jamie, so it's Jaime. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Jaime Hunt IMC, Jaime. There as well. I'm still calling it Twitter because I refuse. And then I haven't had
anyone on this show that doesn't refuse to call it Twitter. No one naturally calls it X.
I'm not here for it. And then I started a TikTok, the Higher Ed CMO. So you can find me there as well.
Awesome. Well, this has been amazing. Feel free, people listening, to reach out to Jaime if you have questions about anything related to what we talked about today, or just to connect. But Jaime, thanks so much for being here. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It was great talking with you.
Thanks for listening. 3 things I want to give you before you go. Number 1, reminder to sign up for my free weekly newsletter, all about creating content that resonates emotionally with your audience. And you can do that at unveiled.tv/newsletter. Unveiled is spelled UNVEILD. Number 2, if you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Share it with your team, your boss, your dog, whatever. And if you're not already subscribed, I'd love for you to do that. Number 3, reach out to me. If you have comments, questions, you want to talk about a video project, whatever, my email is john@unveiled.tv. John is spelled JOHN. Or follow me on LinkedIn. If you're searching for me, my last name is spelled AZONI. That's all for today, and I look forward to catching you on the next episode of the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast. Thanks.